Hello, Teaching and Learning class. This is an update on Assignment 3, the Special Populations Project, and there are a couple of changes that I want you to make note of to make sure that everyone is on the same page. So one of the first things you might notice, if you have not been to the area lately, there was originally a project example, and then there was the instructions for the Assignment 3, the Special Population Project, but I've gone ahead and uploaded an additional example. I personally think it might be a little bit better. Neither one is perfect, though, so just know that, up until this point in time, I have not had a perfect paper submitted. So there are always improvements. Just make sure that you follow along the assignment instructions and make note of, grammar errors, spelling errors. Those are some of the little ticky things. The APA format for your reference list, and if you use in-text citations, just make sure that you are following proper APA format. So the other thing, I'll just kind of take you through the instructions underneath this part, and then we'll also talk about writing goals versus objectives. And then there are a couple of changes that I have made or updated on Assignment 3, so I want you guys to pay particular attention to some of those changes. So basically in this assignment, you will think of yourselves as the school library media specialist. Some of you guys have an advantage in that you are already in a library media center, but most of you guys are still classroom teachers. So sometimes it is hard to kind of switch from that content area teacher to think in terms of how you would teach within the walls of the library. So for this assignment, you will work with a teacher whose specific job is to teach a special group of students with special needs. You'll create a needs assessment, and make sure that you don't confuse this. In Assignment 4, you will also do a learner analysis. That's more about how the students learn, what types of learners they are, what they prefer. The needs assessment is where you find out what you can do to improve the student's understanding or grasp a particular skill or lesson from some content area. A needs assessment, it could be conducted through some type of interview with that special needs teacher, but you will formally write down those questions and you'll create that formal needs assessment. And this will be included in Appendix A. And make sure when you put together your paper, you'll have the body of the regular paper, then you have your reference list, and then any appendices that you include after. Those come after your reference list. And from those answers, though, from that needs assessment, you'll write up a summary of what you've learned about your group of students. And that will be included within the body of the paper. So, for example, if you have the ELL teacher who works closely with the social studies teacher, because you have those English language learners, those students need a little extra help understanding the geography of the United States. So this special ed, or not a special ed, the ELL teacher has asked you if you can help the students in the library with their geography skills. So how would you, as the LMS, teach those skills to your students? And the lesson you choose should be taught within the walls of the library. So you might include some type of technology that you could include with that instruction, but it's you need to think about how can you help those students. After you write up the summary of the body of the paper, or the needs assessment, you'll create 4 overall goals, and I've misspelled overall, so I'll have to go back and fix that, to improve instruction, or it could be resources or services for the population through the library. For each of your goals, then you'll write a minimum of 2 objectives. You'll rank those goals in order of importance. What is the most important goal? And then your next important, and so on. Finally, you'll briefly outline at least 3 possible lessons which would address those goals. you'll need to include a minimum of 2 instructional strategies for each of those lessons. And you'll refer, I have another typo, to the assignment description for complete details of what should be included. So I'm going to show you guys some changes there in just a minute. There is one example of a student's interpretation in this first file, but I have gone ahead and included a second one. Make sure you adhere to the specifics of the lesson outline or assignment. Don't just follow their example. It's there to help you just kind of see the big picture of what a finished project looks like. So we'll talk about writing goals versus objectives in just a minute, and then I also want to very briefly show you guys a couple of changes. The beauty of being able to copy a course shell from one semester to the next is that it keeps an instructor from having to go back over and reinvent everything. However, there are some downsides, and one of them are a few times I've uploaded things and they've had mistakes, and when I course copy, sometimes I forget to go back and fix those. So I have gone ahead and fixed. There were 2 things. So we'll start with the first. So basically you are going to pick one of those special populations personnel. It could be a special education teacher, it could be the ESL or ELL coordinator, it could be a speech pathologist, it could be an occupational therapist, physical therapist, and I believe this last summer I had someone also work with a dyslexia coordinator who had just been hired as a district position. So if that's your special needs area, you could also include that. In cooperation with that special populations personnel member, you are going to conduct a needs assessment, and you are going to develop a plan to improve instruction for one of those special areas within the Library Media Center. So the first thing you need to do is identify which special population personnel you're going to work with. Identify the population of the students that you'll be targeting. Are they hearing impaired? Are they autistic? Are they Hispanic? Are they some other nationality or some other ELL learner? And typically within this assignment, you don't have large numbers within the groups. It's not like a typical class size of 25 usually, but sometimes you might have one. But you'll summarize the characteristics of the group. And sometimes it may just be 4 students and they may all have something different, but you'll describe each student individually then if that were the case, if they're not all hearing impaired or visually impaired. Step 2, you'll locate a needs assessment survey. You can modify one for your use, or you can create your own. It does need to contain a minimum of 10 questions. You'll attach a copy of the original and a copy of your final instrument if you've modified an original within the appendix of the report. Step 3, you're going to write up a summary of that needs assessment results. Step 4, you'll based on those results, you'll generate a minimum of 4 goals to improve instruction, resources, and or services for that population. For each goal, a minimum of 2 objectives. And for some reason I put in the word not. I'm not sure when I got that in there. It's been a couple of semesters. So I just want you to know that it should be, those objectives should be behavioral. Remove the word not. But you'll break down that process further. The goals are for you as the library media specialist. The objectives, though, are your students as the learner. How are they going to achieve the goals that you've set? And be sure to rank those goals and objectives. Step 5, you'll outline at least 3 possible lessons that you could teach within the School Library Media Center for that special population. Step 6, for each lesson, a minimum of 2 instructional strategies should be identified. And I'm going to show you guys, I'll be sending out a message that will have some places for you to look for instructional strategies. Here's where the next correction should be. I did say in this one, create a list of resources for your instructional strategies. That's incorrect. You need to list instructional activities that you'll use, not resources. And some people like to use a table for each objective or each strategy that they're using, and then what activities they're going to do, but you don't have to use a table here. Just sometimes it looks neater. be sure to explain why you chose those particular strategies for those students. Step 7, you'll write a brief, reflective summary of the entire experience. Step 8, you'll have that reference page. And step 9, the final piece should be that appendix, that needs assessment instrument within that appendix. So an outline of how it should be written: use headings. You don't typically use Roman numerals. This was just so you could see how it broke down, but instead you have your main headings. So each heading, instead of having the Roman numeral, the first one would be the introduction. Then your next main heading would be the summary of your needs assessment results. Then the third would be the goals and objectives. Then the next section would be the lessons. Then the instructional strategies. And again, that's where if you want to include maybe a table or columns, that's fine to do that. The next would be the reflective summary, then the reference page, and finally your appendix. Notice there are 2 further changes. The points, when we get to the rubric in just a second, you'll see that there was a change in the numbers. So the total points earned, this will be out of 55 points instead of 57, and the minimum expected level of proficiency is 40 points rather than 41, but I don't foresee that for anyone. So here is the rubric, and originally I believe the rubric that was posted had 5s for above basic and proficient. Very, very, very rarely does anyone have complete and total proficient all the way across the board. I've not seen it yet on this assignment, but you know, there's always an exception for everything. So this column is worth 6 points, not 5. And everyone who turns theirs in on time receives 1 point, because if you figured out the 6 points for each of these 9 areas, that's 54. So I've given you guys 1 point to submit on time. That brings us up to the final area. Just make sure that you understand the difference between a goal and an objective. Last year I used the overarching goal to finish my doctorate. That was my entire giant goal, but to achieve that, there were steps that I had to take that needed to be met first, and those would be my objectives. So one objective last year that I used was between now and February 14th, so it would have been between September and February 14th. I wanted to finish my research residency paper, and that was helping me get toward that goal of achieving my doctorate. So my objective was the learner will complete with 100% accuracy the research residency project. Then I had another objective. I also had to complete my comprehensive exam. So for objective 2, the learner will complete, without losing her mind, the IDT doctoral candidate comprehensive exam. So for assignment 3, you're going to create some goals, at least 4, and then you will have, those are the overarching things that you would like to achieve with your students. Then along the way, you need to break that down into those small achievable steps, or those objectives. And those are objectives with your students as the learners. And for the PowerPoint, just to kind of back up, this was an activity that we did when I was working on my doctorate on writing goals and objectives. So that was this was one that I had put together. So 490 was the course number. SWBAT, if you did not know, that would be student will be able to. We were just trying to shorten it because this was a SlideShare presentation. So student will be able to write learning goals and lesson objectives for their instruction with students. So the objective, to break that down, the student will be able to, and that was me, write 1 lesson objective for each learning goal by the end of this class with 100% accuracy. So if you go through the rest of the presentation, just pay attention to the difference between those goals and objectives, kind of see how to write it, and be ready. With any questions, please email or let me know if you're unsure still of how to put this together.